And we are live.
All right.
So thank you for joining me here.
Good to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the next installment of the Past Presidents Podcast. In today's episode, we have the honor and privilege to sit with the one and only Joe Grabas. Now, I'm tell you, I had to make a list here because it's really quite impressive, you know, when you list out a person's accomplishments and activities that they do. I'm just going to make you sit here and listen to me say it back to you for a minute or two. Good. So, Joe Grabas is a certified title professional with the New Jersey Land Title Association. He's also a national title professional with NJLTA. Okay, so highly qualified within the associations. He has a BA and a master's degree in history from Monmouth University. He's an Eagle Scout, something we share.
That's right.
We're both Eagle Scouts.
Very proud.
I just want to point out for Joe's benefit that I remembered to wear my CTP badge.
Yep, something else we have in common.
Yes, I've been guilty in the past of not wearing mine, and I made sure that I had it on today.
Good.
For this meeting. Joe is obviously past president of the NJLTA. That's why we're sitting with him here today. Your years were 97 and 98.
That's correct.
Right? You also received the President's Award in 2014.
Yes.
That's great. You were the second agency section chair.
After
Len Rossetti.
Yeah, that's right.
Len Rossetti was the first, and Joe was the second. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later.
Sure.
You currently are a member of the New Jersey Tidelands Resource Council.
Yep, 13 years now.
You're a title educator for insurance, legal, and real estate continuing education.
That's correct.
You're a qualified expert with the Supreme Court of New Jersey in matters of title insurance, and you're a professional witness for title insurance litigation and other matters. You're an author of the book Owning New Jersey, of which I have 2 copies, both signed. I have one for the family room coffee table and the other one for the powder room, just because, you know,
wow,
in case you need some material.
Yeah.
Well, you have to have 2. You're a frequent advocate contributor, which is, as you know, this podcast is a part of the Advocate. So, you know, it's bringing you back home to where you've contributed so much.
It's been a little while, but
it's been,
you know,
but maybe we can spin this back up.
Yeah.
Maybe this will be So you are someone who's into historical land title research, and you pretty much developed that as a niche for yourself. Let's see, husband, father, grandfather now.
I am a grandfather.
Just one?
That's correct. Just one.
Okay. One. Any more? Maybe?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
But we're hoping.
It's never up to you. So,
yeah, it's not. A lot of influence on that.
Now, we mentioned, or I don't know if we mentioned on air, if we said it beforehand, but you co-hosted with me on the Past Presidents Podcast for our 2-hour in-depth interview with the one and only Larry Feinberg.
Yes, the one and only.
That's probably our most famous episode today.
Yes.
You're a member of the Monmouth County.
For a Grammy or something for that?
I think I forgot to submit it.
No.
So it's my fault, but maybe we'll see with this one.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get the submissions in on time. You're a member of the Monmouth County Historical Commission.
That's correct.
And I would also categorize you as a world traveler.
I'm trying.
Do you know how many countries you've been to?
A lot. I haven't, but yet that's really only mostly North America, Central America, and Europe.
Right.
Have not been to Asia or Africa or South America. So there's plenty of world left.
I've only been to the contiguous 48 and a little bit of Canada. Okay. So you got me beat.
All right.
But like you said, there's lots of time and lots of places left to visit. So
that's right.
I hope you get a lot more opportunity to visit all that. So look, that's a mouthful of accomplishments to put out there. And I think it speaks well to the type of person that you are. that you're motivated and inspired and passionate about this business. And that's one of the things I'm most excited about with this interview, is to learn more about what it is that excites you about title and what it is that you feel is the highest and best purpose of the NJLTA. So without further ado, I'm gonna hand the ball over to you with this topic.
Okay.
Okay. And this is topical. Of late, there's been some conversation about wanting to merge the agency section of the NJLTA in with the association at large. And I know some people have trepidations about that, and others see it as a very progressive way of creating efficiencies and bringing our association in line with other associations across the country.
Right.
I don't agree or disagree 100% with either side of the argument. I kind of, have my own opinions, but I think it's important that we ask you, somebody who was there when the agency section was formed, where did it come from? Why was it formed? And in your opinion, is it still important today, or what is important for agent members to focus on?
I think obviously the title industry has mirrored our society in the way that it's developed over the years. I think the original name of the association back in the turn of the century, the early part of 20th century, was like the Society of Title Men or something like that. I mean, it was definitively title men.
Right.
And it was a man's business. And it was populated by many attorneys and individuals who would go out and do the title research, so that you weren't just title searchers, but you were title insurers, you were title examiners, all that wrapped up into one person. Yeah. And when I came into the business in '78, it was still very much that way. I saw my progression in the business starting in the record room as a searcher and working my way up. That was the way it happened, because it was really an apprenticeship system. There was no formal education per se. Under the Title Act, which was only passed in 1974, so literally 4 years before I came into the business, mm-hmm. was the first time that anyone needed to be licensed in the title industry. Mm-hmm. And that all came out of RESPA and a situation in the state. And a lot of people don't realize this, but I remember Jim Lohman tell me about it, because he was here before me and he was a generational member of the industry, how basically they would go from attorney to attorney and just negotiate what their kickback would be. Mm. That would be it. It'd be like, hi, I want your business. How much do you need back from the premium in order to send the business my way? And that's the way it was done. And then RESPA came along, mm-hmm. because this was widespread. It wasn't just New Jersey. It was throughout the country. They realized that the money that was supposed to be going into premium reserves and supposed to be standing behind these policies that people were getting, most of it was being siphoned off to individuals, and there wasn't nearly enough money being put in reserve. If you look at the Title Act, there's an entire section on reserves. The title companies were mandated by the Title Act to reserve a certain amount of money in case they went belly up, right? This is what insurance is all about. And of course, we're not Prudential or Metropolitan or one of those big companies. Mm-hmm. We are still to this day, as I've heard many times, and I use it myself, we are the flea on the tail of the dog of insurance. Right. It's that simple.
True.
We might think that we produce a lot of premiums. We do not. It's not even close. Nothing. And so So, we found ourselves in a situation where we had this very changing environment. We went from no regulation at all to 4 years before I came in, all of a sudden the Title Act. And we would find that within 14 years of that Title Act, the whole thing would be overturned again under the Producers Act.
Mm-hmm.
Because once again, people were saying, you know what, it's still not working. The stuff that we were supposed to be doing under the Title Act is not working. When I first got involved with the title, the agency section and the idea of the agency section, and I got to learn and meet my brethren from South Jersey, it was the first time I got to realize that there was two entirely different ways of doing things in the same state, in a little tiny state. We're not talking about Texas where, oh, you're in South Texas or North Texas. No, you can drive across the state in 2 hours? From top to bottom. And yet what was happening in South Jersey was so completely different than what was happening in North Jersey. And I'm sure everybody knows it. It has to do with the influence of New York versus Philadelphia, right? And Philadelphia influenced South Jersey, New York influenced North Jersey. And there's this weird sort of vacillating line through the middle of the state. We still don't know what's North Jersey and what's South Jersey. And those of us who grew up in Central Jersey know exactly where those places are because they're not us.
That's right.
Okay. But so I come into it and I realize as a title searcher in 78, I'm still going to college. I'm searching. I'll go to school. I'll get on the bus at Rutgers. I'll stop at the courthouse. I'll search for an hour or two. I'll get back on the bus. I'll go to my next class. That's what I was doing. And I was in the theater. I was a theater major, a theatrical design major. And I thought I was going places. I really did. I wound up doing a show at Lincoln Center, Beethoven's Fidelio, the American premiere of the original Fidelio. And I thought I was on my way. And then I found out the very hard way that it's a business like any other business, that the theater's just a business. And after my experiences with the unions in New York and with other people down in Princeton, investors, things like that, it became very clear to me that this was going to be a very hard road to follow. And meanwhile, I was getting really good at this title searching thing, And I said, you know what? Let me give this a shot. So by the time 84 came around, 83, I started my own search company. 84, I had to get licensed. That was the next step in the progression, right? Become licensed. But at that time, only people who owned title agencies, title agents, became licensed. There was no such thing as a title producer. Didn't exist. Title agents got licensed. So it was me and my partner. And we went to a little class in the basement of Bob Hartlob's. He's an old-time title guy up in Summit, New Jersey. We went to there, and Wanda Custer was there at the time. And we learned. And I was there in the same room with guys like Pete Uzzolino and other folks. And we had been working side by side in a record room searching, and now we're trying to make that next giant step and become entrepreneurs, become title agents. And that's 84. And now in just 3 years, once again, the title industry is turning on its head. Two big things happened. Number one, the Model Title Act was presented to the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, saying this is what you should all be doing. We should be licensing everybody. Anybody who solicits, effectuates, or negotiates a policy of insurance should be licensed. That's a big difference, right? All of a sudden, it took that close professionalism of the title men and expanded it to everybody. That means that title clerks and title secretaries and everybody would be required to get licensed. And it looked like New Jersey was going to adopt this. And of course, they eventually did. It went into effect in 1988. At the same time, and I provided you with a copy of an article there. It's from the front page of the Star Ledger. And I think it's December 20th, 1987.
Correct.
And it's an expose about the title industry, basically saying it's bogus, that we collect a lot of money, we pay very little of that money out in claims, and most of it is kept by the title agents because they get a bigger percentage of the split. Something that we all know about in the title industry, but he said in his article, this guy Jaffe, and he became a hated figure in the industry. But really, the problem was the CARP report, the Len CARP report, and he worked for the insurance department, and he did what he felt was an expose on the title insurance industry. You have to understand that for the most part, they didn't even know we existed down there.
Right.
Literally didn't know we existed at all. And this guy never had any experience in title insurance, decides to write this expose, and it just spills out onto the front page. And I think it's at that time that the people in the title association, this good old boys club, and when I say good old boys club, I mean good old boys. There were two women, one of which was slightly before my time, and her name escapes me, but it's on the website. And then Marianne Tominelli, and she was coming, and she worked for Chicago at the time. And God bless her soul, she died very young of cancer. And otherwise it was all men. And we would meet at the Landmark Inn in Woodbridge, that was a senator's estate, and it would be in a locked room. I mean, you showed up for the meeting, there were representatives of the title companies and eventually representatives of the title agents, and it would be a locked room. We would literally go in there, they would pass the menu around, we would order off the menu, we would take a small break for lunch, and then we'd be right back at it, and the door never opened. You didn't get in that room unless you were a representative of a title company, or once we created the agency section, 2 agent members. You didn't get to bring anybody else with you.
But just to color that for a moment, before the agency section was formed, I was completely closed out to anyone other than a title insurance company.
That's right. They would have conventions every year. The Title Association would have a convention, and the only way an agent would get to come is if a title company sponsored you to come as their guest. And that usually was your big producers, your big agents would get invited to come to and the other thing is all the conventions were in New Jersey. Most of them were at Seaview, every single year, which is down by Atlantic City, if most people don't know. And that was the only way you even got close to the title company, to the Title Association. And of course, the same thing went for the Rating Bureau, which was built into the Title Act. We didn't get to sit at that, and we still don't get to sit at the Rating Bureau table. And there was a guy named John Weigel. He was our director at the time, executive director. Great guy, good attorney, ruled the association with an iron fist. I mean, he ran the meeting. It's nothing like it is today. We'd walk in. John was sitting at the head of a big box where everybody sat, and he ran the meeting. Not like today, where the president really runs the meeting, and then we'll ask the director for some comments. And it worked well in the for what it was, right? However, it was really a room with maybe 15 people, and they had no voice. They had no recognition down in the insurance department, and they had no voice politically because we had no PAC at the time. We weren't making contributions. We had no collective voice. And so I think that because of people like Rick Wilson, and I can't say enough about Rick Wilson. Rick Wilson I was just a young kid at the time. I was 28 years old, sitting there with all these venerable title people.
Sure.
But I had a lot of gumption, which I guess I still do. And
Yep.
so I said, why not me? And I became part of the group. But Rick, he's a little older than I was. I think he was in his early 30s. And he was the state manager for Transamerica, which was a brand new company in New Jersey. And basically, he was really led the charge for this and said, hey, listen, we need these agents. We need these agents to get involved. We need the power of the agents. I think in one of these advocates, I did the math at the bottom. There's some notes somewhere written down that shows that even then, even in like 1988, the agents were writing 83% of all the policies written in New Jersey. 83%. So we were the industry. Now, we didn't maybe get some of the big deals because they would go directly to the title company for some of the big commercial stuff. But the volume of work was being conducted by agents. And Rick recognized that. And Rick recognized the fact that you can't have 15 people and make an impact in Trenton. That the actual business owners, and remember back then, a lot of the companies had branch operations, but the difference with Transamerica was they never had a branch operation. They were an agent-only organization. And so he was very much inured towards the agents and their way of doing things. And he saw the value there. Whereas people, and I don't mean to speak badly of him because he was a good guy and a great title guy, Joe Santasuso, who was the president, I guess, or at least state manager of Chicago at the time, which was the biggest company in the state. He was against it. He had been from that old school and said, what do we need them for? And it was people, people like Rick and some others, Stuart Title, their representatives who were also totally at that time agent oriented, who said, no, we need to bring these folks in. And you would think, well, that's great. We'll just bring them all in and we'll be one big happy family. But it wasn't that easy. We turned around and started talking to other agents, and we found that there was this divide between North Jersey and South Jersey because of the fact that we did things so differently in the way we operated, the attorney system versus the non-attorney system, that there was a real concern that the non-attorney group, the South Jersey group, would get overshadowed. They also had their own association. I think it was called the Association of Title Insurance Agents, something like that in South Jersey. The title, something like the TAANJ, something like that. And that was Len Rossetti and Hal Donahue and Pat Brennan and those guys who had been involved, and they had been teaching class down there because we all had to get licensed. Everybody had to start learning. Everybody had to start getting credits. And so they had sort of done this already, but they didn't have the momentum that was necessary. And of course, we needed the unity because we're really not two different states, right? We're one state. And at the end of the day, what was good for everybody was good for everybody. With certain exceptions, but for the most part, we could find common ground. But we had to convince them of that. And so if you look at I gave you a copy of the early advocates. If you look at the very first advocate, if you hand me these over here, and the very first advocate that I have here, which is, let's see, this one. It's from
the earlier ones.
September of '88. So this is just after we got created, right? We really started organizing this in '87, and I can't remember the exact date when we got started. It's somewhere. It's probably in the bylaws or something like that, but I believe it was early '88. And so what we have is we had Len Rossetti, he's chairman, Joe Grabas is vice chairman, Craig Jones, secretary, Lorraine Newman, treasurer, Jimmy Kehoe, Jim Lohman, Joe Petrucci. Now that may not mean anything to you, but here's the deal. South Jersey, Central Jersey, North Jersey, South Jersey, Central Jersey, North Jersey, and sort of northish Central Jersey, okay? The point was we had it written in that we had to have 2 people from every section of the state, plus one person at large.
Right.
Joe Petrucci was the member at large. All these other folks were there specifically representing their section because there was such trepidation that one group would overpower the other group.
Right.
So it wasn't an easy slide in. So not only are we dealing with resistance from some of the old school title guys and from the underwriters, but we were also dealing with resistance from within, even to come to a meeting. And when we created our first bylaws, they were very much intentionally created in a way that we would always be able to be somewhat autonomous.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why we have our own bank account, and we keep our money separate. We pay a due or a fee to the association for being a part of the association assessment every year, but we get to keep our own money. Now, I know now I think it's being managed by the executive director. We used to do that all ourselves. So Lorraine Newman did it for years. She was the perpetual treasurer and kept the money on the side because we were always fearful that someday we would have to actually sue the underwriters over some particular thing that we didn't agree on.
Right.
And there's plenty of places that we didn't agree.
Did it ever come close to that?
Yeah.
Is there a particular time or event that you could recount?
Well, I think one of the things was, and it sort of came up with Mike Kehoe. He worked for Canadian.
Yep.
And they were there was a bill that controlled business bill that would have greatly expanded controlled business from what it was. And I think the underwriters were conflicted because their attitude was they didn't really care where the business came from.
Sure.
Right? It can all come from one company or all can come from 180 companies. We don't really care as long as we get it. As long as we get our piece of the pie.
Right.
Each underwriter was thinking.
Right.
So if I can get Canadian, then I get a bigger piece of pie. And if they get bigger piece of pie because of that law, then, and meanwhile, all of us rank and file members of the agency section are saying we gotta fight this thing, and they were unwilling to take a position. And we were talking about different ways that we were going to try to. We couldn't use the lobbyist because the lobbyist was both of our lobbyists, so we couldn't influence them.
Yeah.
So we're talking about how are we going to do this. In the end, the bill got defeated. It didn't go anywhere, and so it didn't come to that. We never actually had to, go against them or file a lawsuit against them. But that wasn't the only thing. The Producers Act. Do you know that you could spend your entire career, and maybe you probably do because you're a bright guy, but you could spend your entire career in the title industry and never take one single title-related continuing education course.
Right.
You could take life insurance, you could take viatical settlements, you can take health insurance, public adjustment. You can take all those things and never take one single. And we just thought that was absolutely horrible.
Right.
But the underwriters were not really interested. They didn't care.
Right.
They don't care.
Yeah.
Are you sending your remittance? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Are you underwriting properly? And you would think, well, yeah, but if they know more, then they would underwrite better. They would not fight that fight. And I remember sitting there at the table, figuratively pounding my fist saying, come on, folks.
Right.
This is common sense.
Yeah.
But that's my education background, right? I mean, I appreciate education and that everybody should get educated. And so there were definitely places where we
Mhm.
came very close to going in opposite directions, schisms, if you will.
Sure.
Um,
And if you don't mind, as
Go
I'm
ahead.
listening to you, give you a chance to
Yeah.
wet your whistle there. I know you've been going. And, when I listen to you, I think there's a lot of interesting symmetries between what was when things were getting formed and what is happening now.
Yeah.
If you think of the Jaffe article, it
Yep.
reminds me a bit of title insurance being mentioned during the presidential address.
Yeah.
I assume that back then that article being in the Star Ledger on the front page had a similar impact.
It was huge. I mean,
for people in New Jersey
that
as it
was
did for
the-
title agents.
That was the paper of record,
right
in New
throughout
Jersey.
the country,
Yeah.
being name checked for your industry
Yeah.
on the presidential address. And also, as you mentioned, the conflicts with differences of opinion with the underwriters. I'm brought to mind the issue that many agents have with the way the closing fee is structured.
Yep.
And I know I've never made it a secret that I'm not pleased with it, and that if there was anything that whenever an underwriter asks me what can we do for you,
Right.
I say fix the effing closing fee. I don't need pens. I don't need sticky notes. I just need you to fix the way that closing fee works because it's broken.
I need to get paid for what I do.
Right. And not have either a race to the bottom,
right,
or just a nonsense quote of work that's never going to be checked.
Yep.
Because that's what everybody's doing. And it's hard for honest agents to find that sweet spot that doesn't put you at a competitive disadvantage, but also doesn't run afoul of the regulation.
Right.
You have to charge for how much work you think you will do.
Right.
But it's a shall charge. So if you have to charge for every hour, but you need to get those fees into the underwriter, to the lender ahead of time.
Right.
Catch-22.
Yeah.
So it's broken. But so I see that throughout the evolution of the association and the agency section, specifically, these types of scenarios, adversarial almost scenarios, will arise and crest and fall and evolve. And I think we're at another turning point or another inflection point in the evolution of the association and the agency section. I'm just wondering if you see that the same way.
Yeah. So just an aside for a minute, as much as I said it was a good old boy organization in the past, we're anything but now.
Absolutely.
I sat there at the down in
Sentiments.
Yeah, wherever that was, right? Riverton, wherever it was.
Riverton Country.
Down, yeah.
Yep.
And just remarked about the fact that everybody sitting at the table were all women.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this for a while. I mean, women have not only taken over the industry across the country, because I go to a lot of these national events, the NJLTA events, but they've become the leaders in the industry. I mean, it's not just, they're taking up space. They're running this whole thing, and it's phenomenal. I mean, it's absolutely incredible to see that. And but on the other hand, I also see the fact that maybe we have to re-envision the association and its purpose. That what we didn't do in the past, maybe wanted to do, but never arrived at, was find those commonalities and join together on the commonalities, and then find alternative results or conclusions for the other things. Maybe not everything is going to be solved through the association. It's that simple. And so look at the association for what it can bring. So like right now I'm working with Amy Holder and a bunch of really great folks on TIPAC. And I have not been as excited as I am ever before about NJ TIPAC as I am right now. because it's always been an afterthought.
Sure.
And now, for the first time, we're really saying, no, we're gonna make an effort to raise money. We're gonna make an effort to put it where it might do us some good, open some doors for us. Like, for instance, supporting clerks that we think are going to be receptive to our needs.
Mm-hmm.
And we've ignored the clerks for the most part, unless we're suing them,
Right.
or complaining about them,
Right.
for 47 years now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it's been. And we've had inroads in the past. George Stickles,
Yes.
dad was a deputy clerk, or a clerk. Pat Kehoe was a deputy clerk. Which got the Penquays. One of them was a deputy clerk. So we've had people involved there in the past, and yet we never really understood that we need to work with these people more, especially nowadays, because technology is just changing everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing for me, a guy who still goes to the record rooms. I still go to the record room and search, not just in New Jersey, but in many areas. I've been out the end of Long Island, Suffolk County. I was in Queens the other day. I've been down to Baltimore. I've been in Florida, in the record room searching. And I just got a case in. Somebody wants me to go up to Connecticut. I never searched there before, and you search in each town in Connecticut. But why not? It's just title searching, and if you know what you're doing, you can do it. But when I walk into the search record rooms here nowadays, with the exception of Hunterdon, which has no electronic system, I'm all alone. I'm all alone. It's completely different attitude. The camaraderie that I grew up with in the record room. I mean, I searched titles. We had our own softball team.
Right.
We would go to everybody else's kids' birthdays and bar mitzvahs and christenings, weddings. And yet you're working, it's such a weird business we're in. We work side by side, you and I right now. I mean, I'm not a competitor with you any longer, but at one time I was.
Sure.
I have my own agency, and yet we're side by side working together. And I always thought of it by myself. Could you imagine the Coca-Cola and the Pepsi-Cola guy getting in the same truck and delivering soda every day? That would never happen. And yet that's what we do.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
We every day, and we're friends, and we go out to lunch together, we have beers together, we play cards together. Well, that's all gone now. You go to the record room, there's nobody in there.
Right.
And so that's changed the dynamic of our industry quite a bit also. And that's why it's so important that we in the association maintain those connections, because we are being pulled further and further apart by technology.
Right.
And that's why I like going to the conventions and everything else, to get to see everybody. And that's why it's important for people to come out and do this. We've never been able to get, and it's hard now because you can't tell who's a joint venture and who's not. But to get a full complement of title agents to be in the association.
Right.
And I always thought it was a nominal fee to pay to get definitely benefits that would cover anything that you did. I would always tell people, it was like $175 for a while there. I said, if you come with your staff to one CE course, you've exceeded what you spent in dues.
Yeah.
That's all.
Easily.
Just bring your licensees with you. And yet some people can't get past that.
Right.
However, I think what's promising, and the thing that the agency section has brought to the Title Association, and really what I think Rick Wilson was hoping for, was leadership.
Yes.
If it were not for the agents, they would have run out of leaders a long time ago in the Title Association.
Without recycling.
Right. I mean, quite frankly, at this point, the underwriters are having a hard time coming up with somebody every other year. Just because of personnel, not because they don't have people who know what they're doing or good enough.
Sure.
But because of the system that we have, where you just serve the 1 year as president and 4 years through the chairs, nobody comes back again. The only person who ever did it was Len Rossetti, and that was because of the Mike Kehoe situation. Because Mike Kehoe, because of that legislation that I was asking you about, was asked to step down because they could not support him as president of the association when his company was supporting a bill that many people felt could be the death knell to our industry.
Yes.
And that's why he was asked to step down, and they went to Len Rossetti, who was a perfect choice for that. And I got to tell you a story. I was a young man at this time, full of piss and vinegar, and working my butt off, just doing everything I could in the industry to be out there and get people to know me and everything, and really involved. And by the time it came around, because when Len Rossetti ended his time as chairman, they did not automatically move him into the seats, the 4 seats. That's not the way it happened. He kind of sat there and waited, and we weren't quite sure whether the association was going to allow us to run through the chairs. And then when they went and they asked him and I to be the first president, or in that particular case, the secretary treasurer, I was a little put off. And I can admit this, not because I deserved it more than him or he didn't deserve it, but I just felt like I was on the spot at that time. I had done my work. I had finished my chairmanship. I was ready to go. And they chose Len instead. And then after I contemplated, I realized he was the right guy for the job because I was still too young. I was still too eager, I was still too much of a bull in a china shop. And I think my peers saw that, but I couldn't see that. You can't see that in yourself.
Never can.
Right? And Len was he was a great mentor to me. He was an old sage, even when he was still a young man. He just had that kind of demeanor, and I hope that a little bit of it rubbed off on me over the years. And so when my turn came up, I was happy to serve in that capacity, and had a little more humility. Yeah.
Yeah, get that.
So made a big difference.
So look, I think you're not wanting to artificially wrap this up if there was any other points you wanted to make, but I would like to just say, for what I'm taking from this is that the existence of the agency section was vital to the survival of the association, sounds like.
Right.
And B, hard fought and hard won by the agents themselves.
Yeah. And it still has to be. That's the point. So moving forward, no matter what you wind up doing, no matter what decisions have to be made. I mean, I'm 66 years old. I'll be lucky if I'm around for another 14 years. You guys got your whole careers ahead of you. You have to make sure that whatever evolves from where we are right now evolves into something that's still agent-centric. We still write the largest amount of insurance in the state of New Jersey, the agents. We're still responsible for that. It needs to be, the association needs to be just as much an agent organization as an underwriter organization. And that's going to take some thought. And not everybody's going to be excited about that idea. Right. It's going to have to be negotiated. It's going to have to be hard fought. And some people are going to have to be convinced of certain things. And probably what it means is that the agency section is going to need to have a greater leadership position within the decision-making process of the organization. Mm-hmm. Right now, they have 2 votes but it really doesn't mean anything. The way the voting is structured right now, with the combination of underwriters and all, it really doesn't mean as much.
Mhm.
However, they do have to understand that although we do pay an assessment every year, my understanding in the past, and this may be wrong because I'm not on the inside anymore, it was the minimum assessment
Mhm.
was charged to the agency section. The assessments that are charged to the underwriters are based upon what? Based upon premium, market share, right? We may wind up, if we want to have more say, needing to put more cash behind that.
Mhm.
Maybe it's no longer the minimum assessment. Maybe it's somewhere in between, right?
Mhm.
You can't expect to get more sway and not throw down a little more change.
Sure.
You know? So these are things that you're going to have to think about and think hard about. I don't see. I mean, you could leave it exactly the way it is.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's going to be successful for the future. I don't know if that's going to get you to where you want to be. I look at TIPAC right now and the work that we're doing there. And if we're successful, if we start raising the kind of money that we think we can, that's going to have to come from the agencies. Because remember, here's the bottom line. The title companies cannot make direct donations.
Mhm.
The companies themselves. It has to come from the individuals.
Right.
Once again, there are far less of them, even if you take all the employees of all the title company operations, whether it be direct operations or administrative offices, or
Mhm.
it's not even close to comparison to the amount of licensed producers there are in the state of New Jersey.
Sure.
And if we can tap into that, then you can be effective. If you leave things the way they are right now, there is the risk that that influence, that legislative influence, could be short-lived if you don't get more say in what goes on.
Would it be fair to characterize your opinion? You tell me if I'm wrong. You don't have to agree with me just because it's my show. You can tell me if I've got this wrong. Would you characterize the survival of the association as more likely when the agents are given more of a say and also take more of a stake, more of a responsibility for the association?
So I would kind of turn that around and look at it the opposite way. What would an association look like without the agents?
Mhm.
It would be feckless.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a handful of people. That's all it would be.
Right.
I saw how it was when I came in, when it was maybe a little more than a handful of people. You had a lot more direct operations back then, and less agent operations. But without the agent, the power of the agent,
Mhm.
whether it be the flesh and blood bodies or the financial backing,
Mhm.
the knowledge, right? I mean, look at myself. I'm teaching. I teach more CE than anybody else in the state, hands down.
Mhm.
What would we do? What underwriter is going to go out and teach as much as I do?
Mhm.
They're not, because they work for an underwriter and they have a job to do.
Right.
My job is teaching. And so that's the kind of thing that agents can bring to the table.
Mhm.
People like me, people like you,
Mhm.
and people who have a passion for this too. That's the other thing. It always comes back to passion.
Mhm.
I'm where I am today because I was passionate and I invested myself in what I was doing. I decided this is my career and I'm going to invest. And I teach. I teach at Monmouth University at their real estate institute, and I teach at a course at Villanova with Steve McNally. And I always tell the kids three things. I tell the kids. I said, first of all, if you want to be successful, You have to be able to speak effectively, and you need to be able to write effectively. Can't do either one of those, forget it.
Right.
And then finally, the third thing is you have to invest yourself, not just show up, not be like, what was it? Woody Allen said, 90% of success is just showing up.
Right.
Well, guess what? If you really want to be successful, it's got to be 100%. Okay. And you have to be present when you show up, not just sitting in the corner. And that's always how I've been.
Yeah.
No matter whether people like me or don't like me, they knew I was in the room. Okay?
Sure. Absolutely.
I was always present. And I think that's the passion, quite frankly, that entrepreneurs and small business people bring to everything they do. They wouldn't be in the business. You wouldn't be in North Star Title right now if you didn't feel passionate about this. I have plenty of people who worked for me for years who never went on to start their own company. I had a bunch of them who have and they were the ones with the passion. That's not to denigrate those who didn't.
Right.
But it's that special passion of entrepreneurship. And that carries over into the association. It's those people who make this association run. And so bringing that passion to the association, you remove all those agents, what do you got left? You don't have any small business people left. They all work for companies.
Right. Right.
And
so
yeah, go ahead.
Taking for granted or assuming, and I agree that the agent factor is essential to the association. Would you agree that the form of the agent's participation is less important than the parity of their voice with the other members of the association? Meaning, if the agency section ceased to exist as a body and their funds were merged with the association, if their influence and voice were at parity with the underwriter members, would that be of equal value to you or as effective in your opinion?
That's the thing I worry about, because we saw the other day at the meeting, and we see at the conventions when people come together and show up for events, if it was just about the voting power, then a few people can show up and wield those votes and control things. And where's the seat at the table for everybody else? All those people who were sitting there in the country club the other day, where's their voice? And I know that, we don't have a big group of people who go on and pontificate at these meetings, but it does give them an outlet and the ability to show up. The thing I worry about is that we create something more like it was when I first came in, where it was a small, select group of people running things and everybody else is on the outside. And so why should I go to a convention? Why should I go to a CE? Why should I do any of these things? I think that whatever form this takes, there still has to be an agency section of some sort to give the rank and file the ability to feel like they're a part and that they have a say in what's going on. That they step up and say, yeah, I'll be on the management board. Well, if I never see the management board, then how do I know I want to be on it? It was very exciting to see all those people sitting up there, all different faces the other day. We've come a long way. And we had a crisis for a while with the title industry. Myself and Al Santoro came back. Al stepped back in as chairman of the agency section. I just sat on the management board just to kind of beef things up. But that time has passed, and it seems like there's a renewed excitement and passion, and that's great. I mean, we all run into those bumps in the road, but ultimately, you've got to be able to be visible in order to allow the rank and file to be interested. So it's going to be have to be a very special situation that we arrive at. And that's why my recommendation is to go and look at other states, how they do it in other places. Don't think that we can reinvent the wheel here.
Or that we have to.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the management board and the executive director are looking into what other states do. And I've seen a little bit of that, and I'm interested in seeing more for sure. I think if we have anything to gain as an agency section, it would be if we had more voice, more vote, but also maybe freed up of some of the administrative or parliamentary duties so that we can turn the agency section meetings into more education and conversation.
Right.
And if we don't have to, worry about passing people through chairs, we just have a volunteer committee that, you serve X number of years and then we get more volunteers. Or it's like, I don't know. I don't have the answer. But like you said, let's see what other states do.
And I think, and if I gave this impression, I want to dispel this now. Even though there's always been certain concerns, frictions, disagreements, remember that we're all in the same industry together, right? And you can't fault the title companies or underwriters from looking at the business from their perspective of the business, and you can't fault the agents for looking at it from their perspective either. It's business, right? And you're in business, you do what's best for your business. That's why it's so remarkable to have an organization like this, because what we're saying is we're, for a moment, maybe going to put our business, purely business concerns aside and say, what are the things that we agree upon that we can do that's going to benefit everybody?
Right.
Everybody's going to feel good about this. And that's where you have to put your energies. You can't put them towards divisiveness and think, oh, they did this and we did that, or we should do this, or we should sue them, or whatever. It doesn't really get you anywhere in the long run. You have to be able to find that commonality. And God knows in our society today, that's hard to find, right? But it is the secret. It's the secret to success.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming together for the betterment of the industry and setting aside whatever competitive ideas you have when you walk in the door and pick them back up when you walk out the door. I think that should be the ideal.
Yeah. And that's hard. I mean, when I'm teaching, I say, especially when I'm teaching realtors, I say, I know you all may work for Weichert or Foxroach or whatever realtor you call a banker, but you understand each one of you is competing against each other. Every deal every listing you get is a listing she doesn't get. But you're here all together, and you all operate under the same banner, so you have to find those commonalities, right?
Yeah.
But we're all but like you said, leave it at the door.
Right.
I mean, there's some people in the business that I know don't like me, but
same.
So far, I haven't gotten into fisticuffs or anything,
Nor would we.
That's been a good thing. 47 years, haven't hit anybody, haven't been hit,
something's working.
Yeah, something's working.
Look, this part of the conversation has been fantastic. I have more I'd like to talk to you about. Do you want to take a quick break to stretch your legs, and then we'll pick it back up? All right, we'll be back in a minute. For you, it'll be like 2 seconds or nothing at all. But for us, it'll be a few minutes. So be right back, folks. We're back at it, folks. I hope you enjoyed that break as much as I did. We had such great stories. We weren't rolling tape. You missed out. You'll have to ask us what we were talking about while you were away.
And make sure we take those champagne bottles out to the trash afterwards.
I've got a cleaning company. It's all part of the podcast package. So look, a nice serious conversation at the beginning. I'd like to lighten it up a little bit.
Okay.
And you're originally from Sayreville, is that correct?
Sayreville, New Jersey. Yep.
All right. And Sayreville High School?
Centerville War Memorial High School, class of '77. Yeah.
How was that growing up in Sayreville? What are your good memories of that?
Sayreville was a great town
Yeah.
to grow up in. Quite frankly, it was a Polish town, which for a guy like me I fit right in.
Right.
The problem is that we were a bunch of big Polish guys, and we were never fast enough to beat the football team from South River or Perth Amboy.
Sure.
They were always faster than us. And then when we went up against Carteret, they were even bigger Slovak guys whose dads all worked in like the chrome factory.
Okay.
And I think they were genetically enhanced or something like that.
Super soldiers.
We'd walk down to the line, and you and I have that in common. Yes. I was the center. You walk down, and there'd be this guy, and I'm like, okay, he's 45 years old. Okay, at least he looked like that to me. Right. And so people were either running by me or knocking me over. So we never had a good football team while I was there.
For you, it was Carteret. For me, it was Neptune. The first time we played Neptune and they had a nose tackle, I was like, what are we doing? What? This kid's got to have been left back 3 times.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah.
So, other places you've lived?
So I obviously in New Brunswick while I was going to college in Highland Park, that area there, then moved to North Brunswick. And then from North Brunswick, I found Freehold. And I've been living there for 33 years now. Right. Love it down here. Have gotten involved in the community. As you said, I'm a Monmouth County Historical Commissioner. And I just became a Freehold Township Historical Commissioner. Oh, so excellent. I spread myself around a little bit because, I got nothing but time.
In that capacity, as a Monmouth County or Freehold Township Historical Commissioner, what do you do?
Well, with Monmouth County, it's mostly redistribution of wealth.
Okay.
The county commissioner under the statutory framework, because there's an actual statute that creates county historical commissions. We get a certain amount of money that's allotted to us by the county. It's not a lot. Right. And then we also, and this has been the last, 4 or 5 years, maybe, the state of New Jersey has abdicated their influence and responsibility for distributing preservation grants. Okay. And they give out 2 different kind of grants. One grant is an operating grant. So if you had like a small museum and you needed to pay a director or for cleaning or keep the lights on, that's one kind of grant, operating grant. The other one is for like a special projects. If you're going to run like a educational program or something of that nature,
or something like that.
Yeah, the Monmouth County grants are almost universally for the preservation of structures. That's kind of something that we're struggling with right now because, first of all, there's not that many. I mean, one of the things about Monmouth County, we have a rich history. Of course, we're very excited about the 250th coming out because of the Battle of Monmouth, turning point of the war. Right. But not unlike a lot of Eastern New Jersey, we knocked down most of our history and replaced it with shopping malls and parking lots and things of that nature. It's one of the refreshing things about going to visit my brother-in-law who lives in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, is as soon as you cross over the river into Pennsylvania, it's like you're in a whole different world. Yeah. You see plethora of 18th century homes all over the place. And here we have like one and we're like, oh my God, we got to save that.
But a good example of how New Jersey treats historical things is one of my favorite stories that involves you. So I thought I was swift because I knew that when the Route 1 flea market was developed, there was a grave that they had to keep above ground in a chamber in the parking lot of the AMC movie theater. Yep. If I went there with my friends, I would say, see that? That's not some electrical generator.
Yeah.
That's a grave.
Yeah.
There's a body in there.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? And then years later, I met Joe Grabas, and at a meeting, he's like, we'll do you one better. I know who that is. And there's a song that may or may not be about that person. Do you want to spill the beans on that?
Yes. So the song is Brandy.
Brandy.
And it was a group that went to Rutgers University, the rock group that went to Rutgers University.
Mm-hmm.
And the story is that they saw that grave sitting high atop the hill, and you have to envision where this is. The Raritan River obviously comes up from Sandy Hook.
Yep.
And it's like a serpentine.
Mm-hmm.
It winds its way on up and then comes up to New Brunswick.
Mm-hmm.
New Brunswick is where, as with anything, Trenton, New Brunswick, they're where they are because it's what they call the head of tide.
Right.
Okay? You can't go any further upstream than that. You've got to stop there, unload your stuff, and carts the rest of the way.
And then the rest is canals.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Then that's why they built the canal.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so this, as you're coming up the Raritan River, on the left-hand side, there's a huge cliff.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really realize it when you're on the cliff necessarily,
mm-hmm.
driving over. But if you were in the Raritan, you would see how precipitous this is. And so these guys, the story is these guys were there. And it used to be a flea market there.
Yep.
Okay. And I mean, I spent a lot of time in that flea market, and flea markets used to be big in central Jersey.
Yep.
You know, and they saw this, and they said, you know what? We can see this girl standing on the cliff, looking down the Raritan River, waiting for her love to come home from the sea. And hence, that's the song.
And that's where Brandy came from.
Right. And that's the Brandy song.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the group, but if you have the Guardians of the Galaxy 1 soundtrack, it was in that movie.
Yes.
So that
I'm trying to remember the name of the group, but
it'll come to us when we shut the thing off again. We'll remember it. But that's a great memory I always have of thinking I knew the hot secret, and then I met Joe Grabas, and he was like, you only know half the story. So you've lived around the state. I've, but mostly Middlesex, Monmouth County. You're involved in Monmouth County now pretty heavily with history, but you're obviously a historian by nature. You've got an advanced degree in history, but for me, one of the things that's the hallmark of a great historian is somebody who can recount and retell what past events in a way that present people or future people can relate to and, take into their own lives and say, oh, I should learn from that. And I think, as well as anything else that you do, that's a very special skill that you have. And I always appreciate how, even if we're learning about tidelands or something like that, you'll have a story that comes from our past, our collective past, about how things were created or established or changed that gives us an insight into the way things always become and then change. And so I just wanted to give you a moment to just let you know how much I appreciate that about you, every time I sit through one of your education classes, I feel like I'm being taken in a time machine and shown the world the way it was and the way it is now. Well, and I tell this to my students, especially when I'm teaching at college. I say history is important, not because it makes you smarter. The historical stuff that I know doesn't make me smarter. We all have our personal history, right? Mm-hmm. Our lives is a history. But the difference between me and you, Mr. 20-year-old sitting in a college classroom, is, like I said, I'm not smarter than you are, but I have experience. And history
is experience, right? That's what history is. It's the collection of experiences, whether it be your personal experiences or collective experiences. And experience gives you perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And perspective, hopefully, leads to wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can make those leaps from experience to history to perspective to wisdom, life's going to be a lot easier for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I've always tried to make that connection for people. And I think it's important. For me, in the title industry, the epiphany came to me around 1991. Now, I had already been in the business since 78, so
Mm-hmm.
I've been in the business, 14 years. But at that point, it was still just a business. It was a way to make money. And then I got called, and I got called about this guy, Jake Brown. And the story's in my book. He's an elderly man. He's approaching 100 years old. He couldn't live on his own anymore. And the only thing he had to his name was the house that his enslaved great-grandfather had built in 1831. And he was still living in it in Fairhaven.
Wow.
And that's all he had left. And yet, when they wanted to sell it so that he could move to an assisted living place, they realized he wasn't the only one who owned it. That his great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather, Jacob Brown, he had 12 children, all with the last name of Brown.
Oof.
Who then, each of them wound up having multiple more children.
Yeah.
Each of them
With the last name Brown.
named Brown.
Oh, excellent.
And so now they're trying to figure out who actually owns this title so we can convey it. And they came to me, and I started doing the title research. And the further and further I got into the title research, and this is where the perspective comes in, I realized this is more than just a title transfer.
Mm-hmm.
This is an entire family's life story.
Yeah.
The last deed of record was 1831. No deeds in between there.
Yeah.
And we have to piece this together so that this man can live out the rest of his days in dignity.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing was I was able to figure it all out. Wasn't easy, but we did it. Everyone, thankfully, in his family, absolutely said, yes, that's Jake's house. He deserves it. They all signed their quitclaim deeds, and it was not a problem. And we were able to transfer it and get the money, get him into assisted living. Unfortunately, he didn't live much past his 100th birthday, but hey,
Yeah, 100.
can't complain.
Bonus.
But here's the stickler. About 6 months later, I'm in Fairhaven. I'm driving down the road. I said, you know what? Let me swing by and see Jake Brown's house on Brown's Lane. Okay. And the beauty of this story was that his great-grandfather, Jacob Brown, not only bought this property, it was about 8 acres at the time, he then subdivided it and conveyed it to other free African Americans. He built a community, an enclave there for free African Americans. At a time when a good portion of the African Americans in New Jersey were still enslaved. And yet he was willing to, he built a church, he built a school, he built a community around this. And I drove down the road, and there I saw that the house was gone, and they were building 4 McMansions on this lot, all crunched on top of each other. And my heart sank. And I said, my God, it's gone. And it was at that moment that I realized I needed to tell that story. Now, I didn't get to tell that story until 2014, which was some 10 years later. 20 years later. 20, almost 20 years later. and wrote my book and put it out there. But it was at that moment that I realized that what I do every day as a title person is much bigger than just a transaction.
Yeah.
That these are people's hopes and dreams and futures. That land was so very, very important that we take it for granted. We even today, we're like, oh, housing, there's a shortage. Yeah, well, okay, well, we'll go buy a condo or this or that. And here was Jacob Brown in 1831, having just gotten out of bondage, and he's trying to figure out how he's going to buy his piece of land. And the only place he can buy it from is from a white person, because those are the only people who own land. How's he going to make that work? Where's he going to come up with the money to do that? How's he going to make that land work for him so that he can maintain it, not lose it to taxes or mortgage or foreclosure or something like that? And that happened also. And it's in my book. I talk about that. The what you call it, the Smock family and the other folks around the corner. But it really, like I said, it was an epiphany to realize that what I do matters more than I think it does. Don't ever take yourself for granted and what you do for granted. It's easy, right? Because we're in a transactional world every day. It's how many closings we're going to do, how many binders we're going to get, how many searches we're going to get. It's easy to fall into that trap that says it's just another widget.
Right.
But it's not just another widget. Widgets are not changing people's lives. Home ownership, property ownership is changing people's lives.
Sure.
And so, maybe I'm overthinking this or thinking too much of myself, but I'd like to think that that's what gives me purpose, to do what I do and be involved. And even now, whether it be teaching or whether appearing as an expert, to try to solve problems. Not everybody's happy with the solution, of course.
Sure.
But ultimately, I come into it, and I just told somebody today, just on the phone a couple hours ago, you have to understand I'm always going to be objective. I'm always going to tell you the truth. There are no conflicts of interest with me, because I'm never going to sway one way or another just to accommodate you because you gave me more money. First of all, I don't care that much about the money. Not that I'm independently wealthy, but it's not that important. It's more important for me, as I told this guy the other day, he wanted me to come and speak at a planning board. I said, I'm not getting up in front of the planning board and saying that. I said, because they're going to tear me apart. And my dignity and my reputation is far too important to get up there and try to make up something so that you can be happy with a lie. Okay? Not going to do that. And so instead, why don't we try to work this out? Why don't we try to figure it out? And in the long run, that's what's happening in this case.
Right.
What they were able to do was the guy next door had brought a quiet title action to cure the title on his property. This guy had the same problem. He's reaching out to the attorney who helped him, and now he's going to bring that same quiet title action in order to fix that title. And now nobody hates each other. Nobody's beating each other up. But up until this point, the guy next door was saying, you don't own that piece in the back. And this guy's like, what are you talking about? And he knows because he just went through it.
Right.
Because somebody told him he didn't own it. And he had to spend some $10,000 or more to fix his title. And you got to do the same thing now. And so we've come to a solution that works for everybody. They don't always work for everybody, right?
No.
But at least I can feel good about the fact that I'm trying to make what I think is a reasonable solution to the problems. What I can tell you is this, and this is the sad part about what I do. I also get to see how the sausage is made.
Right.
And I'm called in quite often to talk about or opine about standards of care for title insurance agents.
Sure.
And what's expected when you hold that producer's license of you. And there's a lot of that going on now, especially with the fraud, wire fraud, things of that nature. And I'm always going to be brutally honest about whether you did or didn't follow the standards of care.
Right.
I'm not talking about extraordinary standards. I'm just talking about minimal standards.
Mm-hmm.
And you would be surprised how many people just have no idea. I'll give you an example. Dealing with one company in Pennsylvania that was insuring titles in New Jersey. Didn't know, this is the owner of the company. Big company.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know what a notice of settlement was.
Wow.
Didn't know what adverse work was in a search.
Okay.
He referred to it as searcher's scribble notes. That's what his exact there. Searcher scribble notes. And he was basically accepting the survey that was sent, the search that was sent to him, and just having somebody in his office copy what was on the cover sheet and make their binder out of that, and never read a document, never look at anything.
Doesn't quite meet the statutory requirement.
No, it doesn't. And that's unfortunate when I see that, when I'm exposed to that. And of course I've got to call people out.
Right.
And say, sorry, you didn't follow that standard of care. While it's lucrative, I'd much rather be working on something else. These cases I did out in Suffolk County, it had to do with interpretation of easements and how one person would interpret and I interpreted a different way. Mm-hmm. That's a lot more enjoyable because it's an intellectual discussion and exercise, as opposed to well, here's the rules, mm-hmm. and here you are over here, mm-hmm. and the rules are over here, and you didn't even come close to the rules.
Right.
That's very different than saying, okay, let's look at this in a broader sense and look at it intellectually and mm-hmm. say, what was the purpose of that easement? And is it even an easement at all? Mm-hmm. Questions like that. A little more philosophical, if you will.
It sounds like you bring the historian's pragmatism to your witnessing.
Absolutely.
What is, what was, and to what effect.
And that's one of the secrets of what I do too, is also I go and look in places that other people won't. So I still go and do searches myself, but sometimes I'll call other people to do them. I can't be everywhere, but I deal with certain searchers because I know them. A lot of them used to work for me because I had a big search company. I sold my search company to what's called the First American year in 2003. It was the largest search company in the state at the time. And so all those people are still working at different places, and I still stay in contact with them, and I can reach out to them. But then I'll explain to them, this is exactly what I need you to do. I need you to look here and here and here. I'm not looking for you to do a title search for me. I'm looking for you to find information for me. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that looks very different than a title search. Mm-hmm. I spend a lot of time, God love them. I mean, I couldn't be doing this job 20 years ago. The information that's available online is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
The Library of Congress, Princeton Archives, Rutgers Archives. I'm looking at maps from the 1700s and roads, looking for who owns this road. And I'm looking at a map from 1755, and it's all available. Mm-hmm. If you just go and look for it. Now, sometimes you had to. I had to go up to Hoboken and take a ride up to their museum up there every so often. But that was fun. It was a little adventure, But that's the thing, to bring all these sort of take an interdisciplinary approach to a lot of these questions, whether they be planning board minutes or things of that nature. Minutes from the Tidelands Council. Yeah. So I do some Tidelands work. I do some consulting I have to recuse myself from those cases, but I will help people try to figure that out. Mm-hmm. And so I got one right now up in Jersey City, and I got a whole lot of maps, and my maps don't agree with their maps, Right. So we'll see who comes out on top, but it was a great exercise finding all that information, saying, okay, these are the facts, just like you're saying, history. And of course, we know the history, all the facts don't always add up.
That's right. That's right.
One of my favorite things is people who look in newspapers. Newspapers generally are not history because they're not written by historians, right? They're written by reporters. So the secret with newspapers is to get that newspaper article and then fact check it all, right? And see how close did they come to the actual truth.
Right.
I had somebody send me the thing the other day and said it was about a place down in Little Silver, Sickles Market.
Okay.
Which is a pretty famous place. And Sickles is an old family. And there was an article in the newspaper, and it said that Sickles took title to the property in Shrewsbury by a grant from the King of England in 1663.
Okay.
And I said, that's a good trick since A, the King of England gave everything to his brother, Duke of York.
Right.
And B, he didn't do that till 1664. So where did they get that information from? And, these are the kind of things that you have to watch out for with history. Many times with they got a grant from the King of England. What they don't realize is if you look at the old grant, you'll realize that it's not from the King of England. They use the king and his reign as the date. It says, on this 12th day of the reign of the king, King Charles II, and blah, 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 blah. And it goes on. There's a rather long paragraph. He's king of this and been king of that, and all these different things. And people don't read any further. And, King's grant. King's grant. No, he's just telling you the date. Right. That's all. In a very flowery way.
Right.
And so, that sort of thing happens quite a bit. And it's one of the things I always taught my people. I was always a big one for education. When I was running my own agency and my own search company, like every Tuesday night, we'd have everybody back to the office for an hour. And I would run a class. This class would be on deeds. Next week it'd be on mortgages. Next week it'd be on federal liens or something like that. Because I thought it was important for everybody to learn everything. And my searchers would come up to me and say, Joe, I found this in a deed book. What is this? And I said, read it. What do you mean? I said, read it. It will tell you what it does. That's its purpose.
Right.
It would not be recorded if it wasn't here to tell you something.
Right.
Read it.
Yep.
And so that's the secret. I read it.
Yeah. I always thought that when I first got into this business and started getting into the examining, responsibility, I felt it was astounding that I would get calls from learned attorneys who spent far more time in school and in practice than I did, asking me to interpret documents for them when, just like you said, all I'm going to do is read it, Jack.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm just going to tell you what it says because things get of record because they're explicit about what they're for,
or not,
and fail
to do what they're expecting to do.
They're of dubious effect.
Right.
But that's something I've always appreciated. Look, let me ask you. I'm going to throw a Larry King at you. You know what a Larry King is, right?
Okay, yeah.
Just a non sequitur. I just had a thought, and I have to vomit it out of my head so that it stops rattling around and making noise. What's the most?
You gotta get a more gravelly voice.
Well, what's the most? I don't do a good Larry King. I do a good Joe Grabas though. So maybe if I get a couple drinks in me, I'll let you hear it at the convention. But I can't do Larry King. So my question is, in your career, what's the most interesting title that you can recall having searched and or examined or insured?
Well,
aside from the Browns, which I'm guessing that's probably high on the list.
That is high on the list, but for a very, very different reason.
Specific
that was
reason.
Mostly genealogical work, tracking those people down. The family was great. I got to meet all these folks, and one of the cool things was I got to meet the family. One of them wound up being a law professor at Harvard. The other one was the assignment judge in the county of Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
And it really gave you an appreciation of where Jacob Brown had come from and was able to create all this for future generations.
When you tell that story, I always envision it being retold on a very special episode of Finding Your Roots on PBS. Because it's the same structure. It's like, start with a family and then just keep going back until you find out something amazing.
Yeah.
And that's exactly that story. So aside from the Browns, does anything come to mind as noteworthy?
And I've worked on a lot of involved in different stuff and insured some, I've insured sections of Rutgers, the honor school and everything. So, but I would say that the one that gave me the most satisfaction, other than the personal satisfaction of the Brown family, that was on a different level, but as satisfaction as a title mind, if you will. Okay. That was more personal, you know, was the Phoenix Pinelands case. So the state of New Jersey came to me, I think it was 2017, 2018, something like that, and asked me to be their expert. And there was a sand company called Phoenix Pinelands down in South Jersey on the borderline between Burlington and Ocean County, 539, if you're familiar with 539 and where it runs through there, and the proving grounds down there, the artillery range.
Pits down there.
Yeah. Well, the sand is really valuable. It's really valuable sand. Remembering that all that used to be under the ocean, right? But it's really good sand. And this sand company they had a mine there, and they wanted to expand that mine. And in the course of some of their explorations, handle some of their title work, they found some defects in the titles to the land around them. And what they did was they took advantage. They went out and they did what we call air hunting, land pirating, whatever, air chasing, hunted people down, got all these quitclaim deeds, didn't say a thing to the state of New Jersey, who had bought all this land, hundreds and hundreds of acres of land, went down to the township, convinced the township that they owned it and the state didn't own it. The township never told the state because now they'd be able to collect taxes on that property, whereas the state wasn't paying any taxes. They changed all the tax line items to show that Phoenix Pinelands was now, and they significantly changed the tax map. Plus, the property was not only on the dividing line between Burlington and Ocean, it was also on the dividing line between East Jersey and West Jersey. So that was another wrinkle that, and that was, as many of us know, that is a much disputed line, okay? The Lawrence line and so on. And so that entered into it also. And because remember, all we have is tax maps. We don't have any filed maps down here. This is the middle of the pine forest. So we're trying to rely upon these tax maps as being correct when we know that nobody actually did any surveys on these properties. The descriptions are vague, and so they hired me to come in and do this. And so I had to go back and research all of this property to figure out what was going on. It was some 7 different tracts of land that equaled, I think, about 700 acres of land. And it came out of some old, the Highland v. Kirkman case, which is a very old case that had to do with a title insurer, a guy named Kirkman, who was involved with Chelsea Title down South Jersey, and there was fraud. It was a very famous case, okay? And it gave you some insight into the fact that the title fraud's been going on forever. Okay? And I actually ran into a guy in these searches, who had bought the property, and then he was from Brooklyn, believe it or not, and he wasn't selling the Brooklyn Bridge, but he was selling property in South Jersey to people out in the Midwest.
Yes.
And he was selling the same lot over and over and over again. So we pretty much had everything in this thing. Plus, we had foreclosures. One town brought a foreclosure on property in a different town. I said, you can't do that. We had trusts involved, expired trusts, and then the heirs of the trust tried to convey the property, the heirs of the trustee, I should say. And I'm saying, you can't do that. You know, you have to go back to the court and get a new trustee named, and just on and on. They had an expert on their side, had me on my side. They had an expert surveyor. We had an expert surveyor. I spent years on that case. It finally went before Judge Hodson in Ocean County in Chancery. The people that I was dealing with, and I don't think I'm not going to say their names, but I don't think I'm telling anything out of school here. They revealed to me, the two deputy attorney generals revealed to me that they had never tried a case before, ever. Ever.
Oh my gosh.
On the other side of the aisle was Mike O'Donnell and Riker Danzig.
Okay.
Okay? Probably one of the best title litigators in the entire state of New Jersey.
Yeah.
And so we lost at the trial level. It was kind of crushing for me because I felt I was 100% right. It went to the appellate division, and Judge Accurso wrote a 175-page decision, completely reversing Judge Hodgson's decision, mentioned my name numerous times in her decision, and basically, between you and me, I think she stole stuff right out of my report, quite frankly, word for word. I'm sitting there going, this sounds really familiar.
Right.
Sounds like I'm talking to myself here. So for me, from a title standpoint, that was the most satisfying.
Yeah.
Because I had, first of all, figured out an incredibly complex title problem.
Right.
Number one. Number two, had beat people who were being deceitful.
Right.
And number three, had preserved sensitive lands for the state of New Jersey forever.
Right.
So it was a win-win-win.
That is a perfect storm. That is really a perfect storm. It's you were on the right side. You were able to dig through deep issues and come out with a cogent argument for your side. And then they gave you a little bit of, drama by having you lose. And then win on appeal. Yeah. I mean, that had to be, very exciting.
Yeah. No, it was something else. Not to mention, I got a little bit of my tax dollars back from the state of New Jersey. Right. So
that's good. Your bank account doesn't know where that money came from, but we know, and it feels good.
But I'm just going to say that the thing about that case was pretty much every title issue you could think of showed up in that case.
Right.
From estates to boundary lines to quit claim deeds to trusts, every single thing showed up in that case, and so it was a real challenge, and yet a great achievement for me, and so I felt good about it.
That's great. Now, look, I wish that we could tell every young person out there who's listening, especially young people who like puzzles, that every day in title will be just like that. You'll come in and you get to solve a complex puzzle and dig into it with both hands and then come out on the other side with a gratifying result. But that's not the day-to-day.
Well, no.
And I think from my experience and from what I hear from our colleagues, attracting young talent to this field is becoming more and more difficult every year. I'm wondering if you had any insights or opinions as to why that might be.
So I think first, the anonymity of the business, number one. Number two, it's insurance, right? I mean, insurance is about the most boring thing
got to change the name.
Yeah, yeah.
We're really only
Right?
somewhat insurance.
There's a commercial on TV. It's an AI commercial. And this girl is going to introduce her boyfriend to her father. And she tells him, just to let you know, my dad's a thermodynamicist at NASA. And so he goes on AI and looks up like, what the heck's a thermodynamicist? And he gets all this stuff and he walks, the door opens and he says, hello, sir, I'm excited to hear about the transfer from liquid fuels to solid fuels. And he goes, and the guy looks at him and goes, what are you talking about? I'm in insurance. I sell insurance, like, because that's the most bland,
right.
non-interesting
Right.
thing you could do.
Right.
And I think insurance at the end of the day is the least of what we do.
Yes.
It really is.
Yeah.
Especially ever since 2015. You guys in South Jersey have been doing it longer, but the fact that we have taken over the settlement, and I said this when I saw it coming, it's one of the reasons why I sold. There was no coincidence that I sold my business in 2015 because I saw what was coming. And I understood that we were going to go from being title agents that did settlements to being settlement agents that did title insurance. And that's what we are now, okay?
Pretty much, yeah.
What's most important is the transaction and not the insurance end of it.
Right.
For the parties involved.
Right.
For us, as representatives of the insurance company, of course the insurance, the risk assessment is important. Right? Risk elimination, all the process that we go to is ultimately important because you are a contractual agent for a company. But in the bigger picture, it's the transaction that matters. Right? And so I think what we have to do is, when people say they're realtors, I think people right away say, oh, he makes a lot of money selling houses. Right? So there's the attraction. I could be a realtor. Many of them go into it and find out that it's not that easy to make money as a realtor. Okay,
Right.
It's a lot of long hours and not necessarily a lot of compensation. But that's why I don't call myself a title insurance person. I call myself a forensic land title expert because that is the direction that I go, and I find that much. And when I say that to people, they go, oh, what's that? Whereas in the past, when I said I'm a title insurer, they go, well, that's a ripoff, if they even know what it is. So what I think, and what I always tried to do, and I had a few people when they were working for me, was in order to build my business, I would look and find out when different colleges have their career day, and I would show up at the career day. Monmouth University has the J.I. Kislik Real Estate Institute. Okay, now once again, I think most of them think, oh, I'm going to get in real estate and make millions of dollars as a developer or whatever. Well, that's not always the case, right? Everybody can't do that. Everybody can't be Kay Abnenian or J.I. Kislik or whomever. One of the biggest areas and where I think is one of my strengths, and I don't know if I told you this, but I went on an archaeological expedition to Jamaica where we did an archaeological excavation of an old slave plantation, sugar plantation.
Sure.
And I knew I wasn't there to dig holes. What they did was they handed me over the slave ledgers. And I curated them, went through them, read through them, and said, what are these documents telling us?
Yeah.
And I was able to contribute to the final report on the Trelawney plantation.
Amazing.
The point being that history people are inclined towards research, and they're inclined towards the kind of mind that would lend themselves to this industry. And so even though they might go there and they get their history degree, and what are their options? They can teach history. Maybe they can go to work for Richard Grubb Associates with an archaeological firm. They're not going to make a lot of money doing that. There's no money in that business anywhere in history. There's no money in it.
Right.
You can make money in a career in this business with a history degree behind you. So I'm saying if you're looking to recruit talent, go to those colleges, whether it be Monmouth or Glassboro or Rowan or whatever it's called now, or Rutgers, and get in there. I know Monmouth has one every year. Every year they have a big career day, and go there and talk to people about what it is you do, but don't talk to them about insurance.
Right.
Talk to them about
research,
land and research and titles.
That's probably the bigger message here is we need to build a better narrative to tell young people.
Right.
Leave the word insurance out of it and talk to them about what it is that we do and what effect we have.
Right.
And try to reach them that way.
Well, look at that show, Landman, with Billy Bob Thornton, right?
Right.
He's not really a landman. I mean, he's trying to find oil. That's what he's trying to do. But he calls himself a landman. That's a vernacular. That's an expression within the industry, a landman, because the land holds the secret to his success. And so we have to be landmen or land people, of that, or at least land experts, land professionals. Real estate professionals always sounds like you're a realtor.
Right.
So, land professional are what we are.
Right.
And so that's where I would go. That's what I would tell young people. That's where I would tell young people in this business to expand their people and get good people. I've never had a problem with anybody that I recruited out of a history program, because they're not going to work for NASA. They're not going to become doctors. Maybe they'll go on to be lawyers, and if they do, God love them. But most people with a history degree do not go on to be lawyers. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do. My son got a history degree. He's a paramedic today. Okay.
Yep.
He could have come into my business. I tried him out, sent him out, did all the things. He said, "What interest?" I'm like, fine.
It's not for everybody.
Yeah, it's not for everybody.
So while we're on the topic of the way things are changing and trying to attract young people, on the horizon, on the near horizon, and some might even say not on the horizon, in our front yard, is the emergence of artificial intelligence and machine learning and things of that nature that threaten, certainly west of the Mississippi, to fully automate the abstraction process.
And it's happening. It's already happening. You go to the American Land Title Association convention, and there are people there that say, "I can do a title search for you right now. Print out a binder for you right now. Just give me the blot and block."
Right.
But you know what? When I went to my first ALTA conference in like 1986, 7. And I asked a guy from Colorado, I said, "How long does it take you to get a binder out?" And at that time, we were advertising 14 days to get a title binder out. And he goes, "Well, we get the order in by 9, I can get it out by noon." So 3 hours.
3 hours.
I fell off my chair, right? So the fact that they could do it through AI today doesn't surprise me, because they already have that. They're already set up in a geographic index as opposed to a name index, right? I mean, that's the big difference. When I sold my search business to First American, their plan was to come in and create a big plant, and I said, "This is not going to be easy." And I can tell you that the guy, I won't say his name, the guy poo-pooed me. "Oh, we've been doing this out there. We know." I said, "Yeah, you haven't been doing it back to 1664, okay? You start somewhere in the 1850s sometime, right? And everything comes out of a U.S. land grant."
Right. The benefit of Jefferson's surveyor.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Public land surveying system. Yeah, I mean, come on. And so you're not out in the woods looking for the tree with 3 blazes on it, And of course they've been somewhat successful. I mean, Charles Jones now has their plant that they built, but it's not what they thought it was going to be.
Right.
They didn't get to that point. Maybe with AI now they can, but they spent a lot of time and a lot of money. That was 2003. We are now in 2025. That was 22 years ago that I sold them my business. Probably my singular greatest business feat ever was building a search company in 2000 from nothing. 3 years later, I was able to turn around and sell it for millions. And so that was an exciting day.
Yeah.
And I don't consider myself a businessman in any step of the way, but I knew that I knew searching.
Right.
And while by the time we were done, we went from 2 counties to 11 counties, which was a majority of the counties, and now they wanted to buy it.
Right.
Because now they're halfway there.
Right.
They got searchers in 11 counties.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger fear is going to be 2 things. Number one, let's face it, the underwriters really don't know what their agents are doing on a day-to-day basis. When I started in this business, I would get 2 audits a year, twice a year. So that's 4 audits. Financial audit, underwriting audit. Nancy Cook would come in my office. She'd go to our stack and she would randomly pull out 15 or 20 files, take them in a room, sit down and go through them, and then come back to me and say, Joe, you probably should have done this. You probably should have said that. You should have taken this out. Maybe you shouldn't have set that up, or, bum, 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 bum. And that's what they did. Nobody does that anymore. There's no underwriting audits anymore.
Right. It's a consolidated audit now, and they're mostly looking for financial problems.
Exactly. That's what they're concerned with. Why? Because we're settlement companies that do title insurance, right?
And they're focusing on where the losses are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them for that. I'm just saying that's what the business has evolved to. So it's easy for you as a young title person to say, I'm just gonna do the minimum and get by. And that used to work. It used to work in the sense that, number one, you could, if you remitted enough, they would sort of look the other way.
Sure.
Or at least work out a plan where you would work off a really big claim. But the difference is that when I first signed my first contract in 1984, I was obligated to pay $1,000 of any claim. That was it. And you know what? They never once asked me to pay that $1,000. And it's not like I didn't have claims, but I was a good remitter. Today, all the contracts, you are 100% responsible for everything that goes wrong.
Right.
They suffer a loss. Even though they're telling you, you're not my agent when you're acting as a settlement agent, if they suffer a loss because of a mistake you made as a settlement agent, they will be looking to you for compensation.
Sure.
Okay? Unless you are a superstar, unless you're remitting a ridiculous amount of money. And even then,
yeah,
they might be working out a payment plan or something like that. Okay? And I've had one particular operation in Pennsylvania where after the 5th time I got brought in to testify against this agent, the underwriter dropped them. Said, we can't keep doing this.
Sure.
Okay, you're not doing things properly. So don't get lazy out there. Don't think that AI is going to be your answer. Because as I teach in one of my courses, 2 idiot attorneys in New York wrote a brief using AI, and AI just made cases.
Right.
So you can't use it's a great tool, but you can't rely upon it to do your work for you.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the AI is that it can do things faster and without bias or without the same kind of bias.
Right.
it has whatever bias the information gives it.
Right.
But hopefully, if it's informed well enough, it's based on fact. But like you said, when certain AIs run into a black hole, they'll make things up.
You're making it up.
So there's probably a good use case for it where there's AIs that are confined to a finite set of information.
Right.
And somebody had, when I talked about this with somebody else, somebody had proposed, like, what if you took the New Jersey Handbook of Title Practice, 5th edition by Larry Feinberg and others, and fed it into a notebook language model, which only knows what you give it.
Right.
Could it then examine title if you asked it plain language questions?
So, and I would argue, having been a person who has used both Larry's book to support my arguments and used Larry's book against him when he was on the other side against me as an expert,
right?
It's not all black and white.
Right.
It's not all black and white. There's shades of gray. And one of the most important parts of Larry's book is the very beginning of the book. He writes in the very beginning, and he tells you exactly what the purpose of the book is. And to paraphrase him, is that he's trying to give the title professional, and in some cases, attorney, the ability to have a greater understanding of title.
Right.
But he even says in his book, I do not answer all the questions that need to be answered.
Right.
It's impossible to do that because you can't imagine every scenario.
Right.
Plus, remember that Larry wrote the book when he was mostly still, almost the entire time, underwriting counsel for a company. And so he had to temper what he would say based upon his requirements to his underwriter, to his employer. A
lot of the language in the handbook, tips you off to that by saying some insurers feel it's prudent to include the following language.
Exactly. Whereas Larry, if you talked to him and said, I would never do that, or I would always do that, he didn't say that in his book. He said some insurers think. And so that leaves a gray area there, right? That means that it's not an absolute. Very few things are absolutes.
Right. I think that's one of the big misconceptions about title in general, and perhaps especially in our neck of the woods, the 13 colonies. I think even people within the industry expect that title underwriting and title examining is a black and white affair. Right. It either is or it isn't. And, from experience, we can say, well, no, sometimes it's neither. Sometimes there's no clear answer. And you have to go with what you think either the best outcome will be, or the most likely outcome, or make a risk assessment when you're talking about providing marketable title versus clean title.
And, experience matters too. And when I say experience, I don't mean general experience, I mean specific experience. I recently had a case where another title person who I've known for a very long time, respect his experience and time in the industry. And he believed something that when I saw it, I immediately said, this isn't right. And then as I dug deeper, I realized, this was not right at all. And I can't understand how he thought it was right. But he did. Maybe it's because he never experienced that particular situation before in the past. Was never called on for that situation. There's also, remember we're in the business of risk. Title insurance is the business of risk, just like anything. Of course, we do risk elimination, but at the end of the day, we still assume certain risks. When we write over that 40-year-old mortgage, that aluminum siding mortgage or whatever it is, that's a risk that you're taking, right? Very small one, but still at that. Guy I used to work for, a searcher years ago, and I learned a ton from him. And he's, once again, very well respected title searcher. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know where I'd be today as far as searching is concerned. And he said, do the work the best you can. Uncover all the rocks that you can. And then at a certain point, you're going to say, what's the possibility that somebody else is going to turn over all of these rocks too?
Mm-hmm.
And then you take your risk based upon that.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you're right.
Right.
It just means that
Sure.
you're taking a chance that nobody else is going to turn that extra rock over and find that thing that you didn't.
Right.
And
or even if it is to be found.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the way I was taught at one point was to say, ultimately, when you're considering an issue, what are all the ways that it can hurt us?
Right.
And how many of those ways can I knock off the checklist as things we can mitigate?
Right.
And then what's left, and then assess what the real risk is.
Right.
And then, kind of work backward. Assume it's going to be a claim at some point, and then how could we mitigate it before we get to that point? And then decide whether or not it's worth taking a chance. It's so rare, but it is a skill that takes like being in the fire a few times, having that experience of seeing it and having to make those calls.
Well, he used to say, just think who's going to bring the claim? Who's going to bring the claim?
Right.
But with Phoenix Pinelands, I learned that that's not always the case.
Right.
These guys took advantage of title defects from 130 years ago and went out and did the research, hired a genealogist, this supposedly crack genealogist from New York, who I proved was wrong, by the way. I have no problem with saying that, because he was such a horse's patoot, and he just thought he knew everything. And he searched, it was not a common name, but somewhat common. He searched the entire wrong family tree. They got deeds from all these people. I show up and I said, that's not the right family tree.
Right.
This is the family tree over here. And then they had to go out and try and get deeds from all those people at $1,000 a pop, But it can happen. Mm-hmm. It can happen, even though when you think you've done everything and it's well behind you in the past, and it's gone through. That was one of the biggest things with the DAG. They couldn't understand. They said, yeah, but we bought this stuff from XYZ and they got it by tax foreclosure. We've got a final judgment that says that this was foreclosed. And I had to really work hard to convince them. I said, right, but the final judgment is only as good as the people that you set forth as defendants. Mm-hmm. If you don't cut off the right people, that final judgment has no effect upon their interests.
Right.
And so in this particular case, the state had bought land, had bought somebody's property from J&M Land. If you know J&M, they're like the preeminent New Jersey land pirates.
Sure.
And so they fabricated title, color of title, let it go to tax sale, foreclosed, bought up the tax sale certificate in a different entity, foreclosed, and basically they had nothing, but they got a final judgment. Mm-hmm. And the state said, well, you got a final judgment. Title must be good. It's like, no, it's not good because it's based upon nothing.
Right.
They made up this title out of whole cloth.
Yeah.
And so, they didn't understand that until I explained it to them. And you think, yeah, but they're attorneys. They should know. One of my good friends who's an attorney said two things that always bothered him about law school. First of all, they never taught him how to run a business. So I had no idea profits, losses, how to balance books, how to make payroll, not covered in law school at all. And even when I went to work for somebody else, they still didn't teach me that. He said, number two, they didn't teach me how to be a lawyer. They taught me how to think like a lawyer.
Right.
All the other stuff I had to learn on the job by doing. So in this particular case, these DAGs, they hadn't done it yet. So there was no reason for them to know it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. So look, we've talked for 2 hours. It's been great. I want to wrap up with a couple of things here.
Sure.
First is, as an Eagle Scout, okay, and as a business leader, and as a leader within the industry. I don't know if you see where I'm going with this, but to what role do you ascribe the power of leadership in steering our association and our industry going forward?
Well, I think it's everything, right? We're all in a title industry.
Mm-hmm.
We all know what we know. Some know more, some know less, but ultimately we're all peers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have that in common. The thing that's going to separate you from everyone else and then have people follow you, because you can't drag people, you can't push people. They have to want to follow you, is that desire and ability to assume the leadership role and then lead people. You can't be a leader by pushing people. I have some problems with that in my family with some of my family members. Like, that's not how you lead.
Right.
You don't lead from behind.
Right.
They don't want to go up on that hill. They're not going up on that hill. You got to go up there first. And so I've always tried to lead by example. And I see a lot of that. I see that in you and a lot of the other good folks. There's some people who just ride the pine. Right. I've seen them throughout my 47 years, Right. They somehow even make it all the way to the top, but they're still just riding the pine. And you say, okay, he's a nice guy or she's a nice gal and they know what they're doing and everything, but they don't inspire me. They're not taking me down that road. I got to tell you, one of the things that I enjoy most about teaching is when people come up to me afterwards and we get to talk about things and they have questions and they also have things to offer and to add and to share. And I think that's because I try to be approachable and sharing. And I think that's one of the best ways to lead is to be willing to share. And that's why I always tell people when I do my seminars, I said, consider me a resource. I always answer my phone. I always respond to my emails promptly. And I'm not going to send you a bill for it until we decide that you need to hire me. And a lot of times that's not necessary, But never don't call me because you think there might be a bill, because that's not the way I operate. I'm here to help anybody out in any way I can. And I find that that's one of the best ways to lead, is to be accessible and confident. I don't lack confidence, that's for sure. And that's, but yeah, leadership is everything.
I agree. I would also offer that true leadership is inspirational. You've tapped into somebody who's a real leader if after listening to them speak, your thoughts are, okay, I want to do that, or I want to think that way, or I need to listen more about what this person has to tell me. So, and I think that's one of your great skills also, is when you teach in front of a group of people, you influence them. You have a great ability to influence people and to inspire them to want to do more and do better. And I know I took that from you and from Al Santoro, who pulled me up out of the crowd, that one day. And, folks like you in the industry, or just, exhibited what ideals I was aiming for. So look, I want to thank you for everything that you've done. From the being there at the inception of the agency section and serving as president of the association, and all of the education and other things that you've done within the association for the industry, and all the things that you do on the periphery of it that culminate in making you one of the most valuable resources that we have in the state.
I appreciate that. I really do. That means a lot, especially coming from you, because
Well,
I respect you too.
I thank you very much. I talk a lot, and sometimes things come out, and the words sound good.
We have way too much in common, you and I. That's the problem.
It is true. It is true. But look, it's been a fabulous interview, and I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Absolutely.
And I hope the folks at home enjoy this as much as we did, and give it a full listen. And you've got this repository of old advocates. I don't even know if anybody else has that. I don't even know if the folks at the Advocate have that.
Yeah, so, unfortunately, I'm missing some, but
I think that's a very complete, pretty complete collection you've got there. I might aim Heather Bell at you and say, hey, maybe we want to.
I don't have the newer ones, but you guys have all that stuff on
We've got those. It's the old ones we need to archive. So
I got these here. Yeah, absolutely.
All of this is about retaining history.
Yeah.
Come back and have a little bit more symmetry in our conversation. Yeah. History comes back again. That's what this podcast is about, making sure that we pass forward the experience of the people who were there, so that the people who are here now and the people who are yet to come can gain from it. And so I thank you. And that's it, I guess.
Sir.
It's a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.